So just the other day, I was taking my Camaro to work, and I was like, man, Chevy did us a good job building this car, this SS1LE. It is the modern day Z28. Now, if you want to fight with me in the comments about it, like we can fight in the comments about it. But this is my opinion. It's not facts, but it's my opinion that the SS1LE is the modern day Z28. Especially based on Motor Trend did the facts for us, and they took it around Laguna Seca, and it beat it by like a minute and 30 seconds or something like that, which is a lot on the track. But with that being said, as I was sitting back thinking about it, like, man, this is a topic that I have not discussed with you guys, and that is the oil systems between the two. Look like GM just did a different oiling system setup, and I just want to explain the difference between it with you guys because I know some people here, oh, it got a dry sump, it got a wet sump, and you guys probably want to know like, yo, what's the difference? Why does it even matter? Like, so if you're into like performance cars, racing, stuff like that, which I assume you guys here because you're watching my channel, I'm going to explain the difference to you guys. Like, what's the difference between a dry sump and a wet sump engine? So let's jump into it. So the question of the day: what is a wet sump engine? Well, to make a long story short, like a wet sump engine is pretty much where the oil pan sits right underneath the engine block, and the crankshaft just pretty much just is submerged in oil. So when you start up the car and so forth, the engine, takes all of that oil from the crankshaft, and it's just rotating in there. It's just submerged into it. So that's how all the parts and the crankshaft and all that stuff gets lubricated in that sense. And one of the things I should say is that the wet sump is three things. It's cost effective, it's simple, and it is great for everyday use. Pretty much every car on the road that you see today, to and from work, I don't care what it is, like it has a wet sump engine. Some shape or form, it's a wet sump engine just because of that, because it's cost effective, it's easy to maintain, and so forth. Far as the dry sump, that's totally a different story, but we'll talk about that next. But another thing about the wet sump engine is that it's good for high G's, but not that much of high G's. Like if you're very taking your car to the track very hard on it, like circuit racing, things of that nature, this is where the wet sump has some limitations. So one of the things I can think of is that think about the Subaru. If you guys had a Subaru WRX or if you heard about them and so forth, the Subarus pretty much have this problem, which is they have oil starvation, meaning that whenever you drive aggressively and do high G's on the Subaru WRX, it run across that oil starvation due to the fact that when you turn hard right, the oil start going all the way to the left, and it's hard for that oil pressure and that pump to be able to get that oil to keep the engine stay afloat. And that's the same reason right here that we're dealing with on the wet sump engine. So we're going to talk about the dry sump and how that's a little bit better. But it's the reason why they don't put it on every car on the road. And I will talk about that next. So, next, what is a dry sump engine? Well, a dry sump engine is pretty much like the opposite of the wet sump. Instead of it use a different oil pan, and it's dry at the bottom. The crankshaft is dry, but it siphons its oil from a different tube, a different canister. So multiple cars run this little dry sump setup, but it's usually more track focused vehicles. Things that I can think of, like in the Chevy world, it'll be the C6s, the C7s, the C8s, and all of those Corvettes. If it's a Z06, it's a dry sump. If it's a ZR1, it's a dry sump. The only thing that came out for Camaros that I can remember that's a dry sump is the infamous Camaro Z28. That's the only one that I could think of that has a dry sump system. And if you look at the engine bay, it has its own canister on the right side, pretty large tube that where the oil goes. And pretty much what happens there is that even though it's a dry sump system, the oil is in that canister, right? And then at the bottom it goes through like a pump, and then after it goes through that pump at the bottom, it filters it through, and then once it filters it through, it goes to the engine block to keep it lubricated that way. And the best part about it about a dry sump system is that one, it can handle um, high corners, high lateral G's. Two, it's it can handle high RPM. Like the stability of the engine is phenomenal. Like it's pretty much well set up and geared for a race engine. That's pretty much what dry sumps is. And three, you can be able to mount the engine a lot lower in the car, which is awesome because then at that point all the weight in the car would be close to the center of gravity, which is phenomenal. Now you may be asking, well, why don't they build all cars like that to be part of this dry sump if it's better for center of gravity, if it's better for performance? A lot of sports cars, high performance cars, supercars use this similar setup. Well, the problem is that it's cost. It's very expensive to have a dry sump system, and especially if you're trying to convert a block from a wet sump to a dry sump, it's pretty much going to be costly. Probably going to be roughly, I don't know all the parts that goes in it per hand per se, but I would say it'll probably between like 4,000 and 6,000 just to convert your system of your engine from a wet sump to a dry sump because it needs extra lines and so forth to filter through the car. You're switching up your different oil pan and stuff like that. But I can go into further detail regarding like more about it, but this is just like a high level. Like, what's the difference between a wet sump and a dry sump? And this is just very like high level. I was driving the other day and I was like, you know what? Man, Chevy did a good job, did us some good service by giving us the modern day Z28, which is the SS1LE, as I like to call it, because it's a wet sump engine. It's great for everyday use. You can be hard up on it. They put that track cooler in there, so you got the best of both worlds of the dry sump and the wet sump, where you can go high lateral on the G's. You can do hard cornering and stuff like that, and it won't affect the car. And for a person like me that's driven the car, I haven't had any issues, and a wet sump system is best for about 90% of the applications out there, how people driving their cars, no matter what. Like, there's not too many people that's driving their cars pretty hard where they're getting high lateral G's on the turn, and especially people at the drag strip and stuff like that. Um, with that being said, which one would you go with? Would you go with the dry sump or would you go with the wet sump? Which one do you prefer? Me personally, like I would convert mine one day into a dry sump, but as of now, I mean, I don't see the benefit of it, so it is what it is. And I'd probably just get a whole nother vehicle, like get a Corvette that already had a dry sump just to save the money there, unless I really love the platform that I'm in. But that's my thoughts and opinion. What's your thoughts and opinion? Which setup would you like to run with on your car? Would you like to go with the dry sump or would you go with the wet sump? And let me know if you have a car with either one and which one do you prefer. So like that's going to wrap this video up. If you want to see more videos like this, check out my other videos where I'm talking about the best throttle body or the best manifold intake or whatever. So I got plenty of videos probably going to be coming up right here or right here. Y'all go over there and check those out. And I'll see you guys in the next one.